once I've dipped the bowl in the clear glaze, I'm ready to start layering the colors. And this bowl is divided into 6 sections by this fluting. So I'm going to do a 6-lobed sort of floral pattern in the interior. So I'm going to vary it a little bit from this one just for fun. And this is a regular old number 2 pencil that I'm just using to grid out the surface. I don't really need to draw the whole pattern, but this will help me just guide my eye. So instead of this whole sort of floral motif that I have in here, I'm going to do kind of a more distinct petals, just a leaf kind of a form. So I'm just going to draw those out so that when I start painting, it'll guide my brush and I don't get too confused. In a lot of my glaze patterns, I just use a few simple forms and repeat and interlock and think about different ways to fill up the space. I've thought about what I'm going to do on the outside, and it's going to be another way of using this shape. So while I'm talking about that idea, I'll just show kind of how I'm going to use that leaf form in a different way on the back. And because this exterior is divided into these 2 areas, well, and a third, the middle, it sort of calls, in my head, it calls for a different approach to the pattern. So I'm just making a little pencil mark every other one, so 3s, and then instead of having these petals be just vertical, sort of the way they are in the interior, I'm going to do a diagonal pattern, because to me that just seems more interesting on the outside. So this is, as you can see, very loose. And then, so this is my sort of how my head works with structure. Then I've got 3 points at the foot there, so I'm going to line up those 3 points inside the foot ring and do a sort of 3-part, like a 3-petaled flower in the middle of the foot. And to me, pots that are as sort of elaborately decorated as this, it would be really inappropriate to fail to decorate inside the foot ring in the back, even though that's a part of the pot that people, well, as I say, they don't see it until they're washing the dishes, and then they see it, and it's kind of gives you something to enjoy while you're doing dishes. So now starts the painting. The first layer that's going to go on is this pale, kind of yellowish, tannish color, which is a wash of rutile. So the background for these petal forms is going to be this wash, which is equal part mixture of rutile and Gerstli borate. And so it's thin like a watercolor. It goes on over the glaze. And I always have newspaper on my glazing table, because then I can just test brush strokes and see what the saturation of the wash is. Depending on how thick this is, it will go from barely off-white to kind of a strong orangey tan. So now I'm just going to loosely follow the shapes that I penciled in. And with this, you can see it's pretty watery. It doesn't really matter if I overlap. I can tell by how opaque it is once it dries on the glaze, sort of whether I have enough or whether I want it thicker. And of course, this is something that you could do with any kind of oxide wash, mason stain wash to get different colors. This is just one particular palette that I happen to use. So the second color that's going to go on is this green, which is, I trail it like a slip. So it's fairly thick. It's a glaze, which I trail over the other glaze. And this glaze has chrome oxide in it, which is what makes it green. And as you can see, it's green before it's fired as well. There are all kinds of squeeze bottles that work really well for trailing. I'm using a hair dyeing bottle just because it's what I've always used, but lots of things work. So it's important to have this glaze be pretty thick so that you can control the line. And this is when it's really great to have newspaper here, because I can test it out and just see what kind of line I'm getting, how it's laying down. And this is a good thickness. So then I'm just going to start doing these leaf petal outlines. And to me, it's more interesting visually if they're not too exact. So I have some that are where there's some white between the green and the rutile, some where the green sits on top of the rutile. Then I think I'm going to do just a band up here at the upper edge. And this is where it's really handy to have a banding wheel, because it will enable me to get a pretty smooth, even line there.